Welcome back to Myths Unraveled. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. Pazuzu, a name that echoes with both dread and intrigue, is a being whose mythological roots stretch deep into the ancient soil of Mesopotamia, specifically within the cultures of Assyria and Babylon. Understanding his origins requires stepping into a world where gods and demons, kings and spirits all existed on a sliding scale of power, morality, and fear. Pazuzu did not emerge from a vacuum. He was born into a rich tapestry of myth where spiritual beings held sway over every element of life, especially the terrifying ones. He was feared, invoked, respected, and sometimes even welcomed, depending on the nature of one's troubles. To grasp the origin and mythological background of Pazuzu, one must first understand the worldview from which he emerged. In ancient Mesopotamia, particularly in Assyria and Babylon, life was heavily influenced by the forces of nature. Storms, disease, drought, and famine weren't merely environmental occurrences, they were manifestations of divine or demonic forces. The wind, especially the southwest wind, held a particularly ominous place in the collective mind of these civilizations. It was unpredictable, destructive, and could carry dust storms, disease, and death across the land. This southwest wind, considered dangerous and chaotic, was eventually personified. It was given a face, a name, a mythology. It became Pazuzu. Pazuzu was identified as the demon or spirit of the southwest wind, and as such, he was held responsible for spreading illness, plagues, and general misfortune. But unlike some other malevolent figures in ancient lore, Pazuzu was more than just a bringer of suffering. His origins are tied to a larger mythological structure that included a pantheon of gods, lesser spirits, and opposing forces. He didn't operate alone, he had enemies, rivals, and a purpose beyond destruction. His most notable adversary was Lamashtu, a fearsome female demon who preyed on pregnant women and infants. This opposition set the stage for a unique dynamic, one where Pazuzu, despite his terrifying powers and demonic nature, could be called upon to protect against even greater evils. The earliest known references to Pazuzu place him firmly within the Neo-Assyrian period, which began around the early 1st millennium BCE. He was recognized as the son of the god Hanbi, a figure about whom little is known. This divine lineage places Pazuzu in a unique position. He was not merely a chaotic force, but a creature with divine blood, a powerful spirit with a legitimate place within the mythological order. That distinction allowed him to be more than just a monster. He had the authority to battle other demons, and even gods, if necessary. In this way, Pazuzu became a complex symbol, an entity of destruction who could also serve as a protector. The ancient Mesopotamians did not see good and evil as strict binaries. Their deities and demons were often morally ambiguous, and their roles were defined by balance rather than righteousness. A god could bring blessings or curses, depending on the context. A demon, while terrifying, could be appeased or even used against another force. Pazuzu fit this mold perfectly. He was an unpredictable spirit, but his power was undeniable, and sometimes, that power could be channeled for protection. This duality made him a figure that people both feared and relied upon. His emergence as a named figure may have also stemmed from earlier beliefs in wind spirits that were not yet individualized. In early Mesopotamian texts, there were many mentions of malevolent winds or spirits associated with illness and misfortune. Over time, these amorphous entities may have coalesced into a singular being with a distinct personality, name, and mythology. Pazuzu was the result of this process, a personification of the destructive wind, elevated into a named entity with his own mythology and cultic practices. His association with the southwest wind is not incidental. This wind was notorious for its destructive capabilities, and its arrival could signal drought, ruinous storms, or plagues. The Mesopotamians, deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature and the consequences of its disruption, would have found it natural to assign a malevolent intelligence to such a force. The naming of Pazuzu gave people a way to conceptualize, explain, and ultimately attempt to manage the chaos that such winds brought with them. It's not difficult to imagine the visceral terror a population might feel watching their crops wither under dry, disease-carrying winds, or their infants fall ill under invisible threats from the air. Pazuzu became the face of that terror, but this fear didn't result in outright rejection. On the contrary, Pazuzu was invoked through rituals and amulets. His image, fierce, grotesque, with wings, talons, a lion-like face, and a serpentine phallus, was not hidden away but worn and displayed. In this, his role shifted subtly. He was not just a demon to fear, but a force to ally with under the right circumstances. His demonic power became a shield against other, even more malevolent spirits. In particular, he was invoked to protect against Lamashtu, who was believed to kidnap and harm newborns. The fact that Pazuzu, himself a demonic force, was used to ward off another demon, shows the practical and layered approach Mesopotamians had towards spiritual forces. The enemy of your enemy, as it turns out, could become your protector. This duality is not uncommon in mythology. Many ancient cultures had figures that blurred the line between destruction and protection, but Pazuzu's case is especially compelling because of how he rose to such prominence in ritual life despite his terrifying nature. People called upon him, wore his likeness, and carved his form into protective talismans. His terrifying presence was believed to scare off other evils, and so, he evolved from a destructive force of nature into a kind of protector spirit, a grim guardian, whose loyalty was not won by devotion or purity, but by understanding his power and calling upon it with respect and precision. In exploring the origins of Pazuzu, one also uncovers a deeper insight into how ancient societies dealt with fear. They didn't try to erase it, they gave it form. They named it. They created myths and rituals that allowed them to navigate a world full of uncontrollable forces. Pazuzu, in his snarling winged form, was one such creation, a symbol of humanity's attempt to make sense of, and ultimately live alongside, the chaos of the natural world. His mythology reminds us that fear, when acknowledged and understood, can be transformed into strength. And in the deserts and cities of ancient Mesopotamia, that strength was called Pazuzu. Pazuzu's image is one of the most distinctive and terrifying in ancient mythology. His appearance wasn't crafted to be subtle or symbolic in some abstract sense. It was designed to invoke fear, respect, and awe. He was depicted as a composite being, a hybrid of multiple animals and human features, chosen specifically to embody power, danger, and the supernatural. Every part of Pazuzu's form served a purpose. His grotesque body wasn't simply monstrous for its own sake, it was a visual expression of his essence, a spirit of the wind, a demon of disease, a destroyer, and paradoxically, a protector. The first thing most descriptions of Pazuzu mention is his face. It is canine or lion-like, depending on the rendering, but always snarling, always ferocious. The bulging eyes stare with a wide, unblinking gaze. This detail alone would have struck fear into anyone who looked upon it. The furrowed brow and gnashing teeth communicate rage and intensity. This was no calm or noble figure. Pazuzu's face communicated an alert, feral watchfulness, like a predator that never sleeps. It reminded those who encountered his image that he was always active, always watching, and always ready to act. The fear evoked by such a face served not just to terrify, but also to protect, since it was believed that other demons would flee from even the sight of him. Then there's the body, which is part man and part beast, covered in scales like a reptile. This detail linked him to creatures that crawled, slithered, and struck from the shadows. Reptiles, particularly in the desert landscapes of Mesopotamia, were associated with death, poison, and the wild, a place beyond civilization's control. The scaled body of Pazuzu aligned him with that chaos. His torso, often thin and bony, adds to the unsettling image, hinting at famine or plague, the very things he represented. The emaciation might also reflect the wind element he personifies, intangible, always moving, hollow, but deadly. Pazuzu's arms and hands are typically human-like, but they end in sharp claws or talons, rather than fingers. These were not hands for nurturing or creating. They were meant to claw, rend, and destroy. He could seize victims, tear through defenses, and mark territory. These talons weren't merely aesthetic, they indicated his readiness for violence, his reach, and his ability to affect both the physical and spiritual realms. The clawed hands also reflected an unnatural nature, emphasizing that he was something inhuman that wore a human shape only in mockery of mankind. His legs, on the other hand, are bird-like, often those of an eagle or another raptor. Like his hands, they end in talons, curved and deadly. These legs remind us of his dominion over the skies. Birds of prey are apex predators from the sky, swooping down unseen until it's too late. Pazuzu, as the demon of the wind, shares this trait. He moves through the air, invisible until his effects are felt: disease, storms, destruction. His bird-like features give him access to the heavens, yet he is no celestial being. He traverses both the earth and the sky, unbound by either. Then there are his wings, large and imposing, stretching from his back like those of a bat or a monstrous bird. Wings are symbols of freedom, mobility, and divinity in many cultures, but with Pazuzu, they are instruments of speed and terror. They allow him to ride the wind, spreading his presence far and wide. His wings connect directly to his elemental identity, the wind demon, and remind us that his influence is not confined to one place. He can be anywhere the wind touches. When ancient people felt the southwest wind blowing, they would have imagined Pazuzu gliding invisibly through the air, his wings stirring the storm, his breath bringing plague. Atop his body sits the head of a lion or dog, depending on the variation, and often adorned with horns. Horns in many mythologies symbolize power and divine or infernal authority. They mark him as a supernatural being, not merely animal, not merely human, but something beyond both. The combination of animalistic and divine traits makes Pazuzu stand apart from gods and mortals alike. He is a force unto himself. The inclusion of horns may also be a symbolic challenge to other gods or demons. He bears the mark of power, and no one who sees him can doubt his strength. One of the most bizarre and telling aspects of Pazuzu's iconography is his scorpion-like tail. The tail, segmented and curling, ends in a venomous stinger. The scorpion is a creature of the desert, feared for its stealth and sudden lethal sting. Including this detail in Pazuzu's design reinforces the themes of poison, death, and invisible danger. A scorpion strikes without warning, much like the illnesses Pazuzu brings on the wind. The tail also adds another layer of inhumanity to his already unsettling appearance. He is not content with a monstrous face or claws. His body ends with a final weapon, a sting from the shadows. He is often shown in a specific posture, with one hand raised, sometimes as if in warning, command, or blessing. This gesture can be interpreted in many ways. In some depictions, it's seen as a protective stance, a warding signal that he is keeping watch against other evil forces like Lamashtu. In others, it looks more like a command, an assertion of power, a curse being spoken, or a signal of imminent doom. This ambiguity reflects the very nature of Pazuzu. He is both a destroyer and a guardian, depending on the context and the relationship he has with the person encountering him. What makes Pazuzu's visual design so compelling is how each feature tells a story. Unlike gods who are often idealized in form, beautiful, symmetrical, radiant, Pazuzu is grotesque, asymmetrical, and chaotic. His appearance isn't meant to be beautiful or inspiring. It's meant to confront, to unsettle, to force acknowledgement. The ancient Mesopotamians didn't shy away from horror in their spiritual imagery. They used it. They understood that fear was a tool, both for control and protection. If an image could scare off a demon, it had to be scarier than the demon itself. Pazuzu was made to be feared not just by humans but by spirits, ghosts, and monsters alike. This makes him unique in the pantheon of ancient beings. Most demons are feared for their deeds. Pazuzu was feared even in effigy. His statues and amulets were carried, not hidden. People wore his terrifying face like armor, not because they worshipped him in the conventional sense, but because they knew that fear could fight fear. His appearance wasn't a deterrent to devotion, it was the reason for it. If a mother feared Lamashtu might steal her newborn child, she would hang an image of Pazuzu above the crib, trusting that his face alone could keep her enemies away. So, while Pazuzu's appearance is monstrous, it serves a function far beyond aesthetics. Every feature is intentional, built layer upon layer to create a being that embodies destruction, wind, disease, terror, and paradoxically, protection. He is an icon of dread turned into a guardian. His wings, claws, fangs, and tail do not represent random terror. They symbolize specific fears tied to the forces of nature and the fragility of human life. He was shaped by centuries of belief, molded by a culture that understood that the monsters of the world could sometimes be the best defense against other monsters. To behold Pazuzu's image is to stare into the face of ancient human fear, and to understand how people learned to use even their nightmares as shields. Pazuzu occupies a rare and paradoxical place in the mythologies of the ancient world. He is not simply a demon to be feared, or a deity to be worshipped. He exists in a liminal space between horror and protection, chaos and order, destruction and salvation. The dual nature of Pazuzu is one of the most fascinating elements of his mythology and contributes heavily to his staying power throughout history. He was considered the king of the demons of the wind, a bringer of plague and famine, and yet, in a strange and potent twist, he was also invoked to protect against other malevolent spirits, especially those who targeted the most vulnerable members of society, such as pregnant women and newborns. This contradiction is at the heart of Pazuzu's identity and makes him one of the most compelling figures in ancient mythology. To understand how Pazuzu could be both a destroyer and a guardian, one must first understand how ancient people viewed the spiritual world. In Mesopotamian cosmology, spirits and gods were not cleanly divided into good and evil. There was no stark binary. Instead, spirits could be helpful or harmful depending on context, mood, or invocation. The gods themselves could be cruel and capricious, and demons could be protective under the right circumstances. Pazuzu's duality, therefore, isn't an exception to the rule. It's a representation of a much larger understanding of divine complexity. The same force that brings disease could also carry it away. The same terrifying entity that harms could also ward off harm. Pazuzu embodies this dualism perfectly. As the demon of the southwest wind, Pazuzu was deeply associated with droughts, plagues, locusts, and illness. The southwest wind in Mesopotamia was not a gentle breeze, it was hot, dry, and often carried dust and disease. Its arrival could signal environmental ruin. It could parch fields, kill crops, and suffocate communities under clouds of dust. Pazuzu, as the personification of this wind, naturally inherited these destructive attributes. When the southwest wind howled through the cities and farmlands, the people believed it was Pazuzu flying through the skies, his wings stirring the air, his breath unleashing illness. He was a walking embodiment of invisible suffering. And yet, despite this fearsome reputation, he was frequently invoked as a protector. This wasn't a contradiction to the people of the time. It was a natural extension of their worldview. If a spirit was powerful enough to cause great harm, it stood to reason that it was also powerful enough to defend against harm. Power was the currency of the spirit world, and Pazuzu had plenty of it. People believed that one powerful demon could be used to fight off another, much like setting a wild animal loose to scare away invaders. You didn't have to love or trust Pazuzu to use him, you just had to believe in his strength. One of the most common uses of Pazuzu's protective powers was in defending against Lamashtu, a demonic goddess who targeted pregnant women and newborn children. Lamashtu was a creature of nightmares, believed to sneak into homes and snatch babies from their cradles, causing miscarriages and infant deaths. She was terrifying, relentless, and difficult to stop. But there was one being who could oppose her, Pazuzu. Despite his own monstrous nature, he was seen as Lamashtu's natural enemy. Their opposition was so well known that amulets depicting Pazuzu were often placed near beds, cribs, or worn as necklaces by expectant mothers. These amulets bore his image in full monstrous glory, wide eyes, snarling mouth, wings, claws, because it was believed that his terrifying visage alone was enough to scare Lamashtu away. This role as a protector gave Pazuzu a kind of practical reverence. He wasn't worshipped like a benevolent god, but he was respected. His image was not hidden away in shame but used boldly and publicly. Unlike other demons, who were spoken of in whispers or avoided entirely, Pazuzu was called upon deliberately. People sought his help in moments of fear and vulnerability. His destructive nature was not ignored, it was redirected. People didn't pretend he was good, they accepted his darkness and worked with it. This relationship was one of utility, not devotion. They did not love Pazuzu, but they understood that he was a necessary ally in a dangerous world. This dual nature is mirrored in the way Pazuzu was depicted. His fearsome appearance was not softened or romanticized. Instead, it was amplified to make his power more tangible. The idea was simple: to use fear as a weapon. If Pazuzu terrified people, then surely he would terrify other demons as well. His grotesque form, lion-like face, bulging eyes, reptilian scales, talons, wings and scorpion tail, was not only a representation of his power, but also a kind of magical shield. The presence of his image, whether carved into stone, cast in bronze, or drawn on clay tablets, was enough to drive away threats. He was an icon of protection by fear. This paradox of destruction turned to defense adds a layer of psychological depth to Pazuzu's mythology. Ancient people understood that sometimes, the only way to survive a hostile world was to embrace the terrifying aspects of it. In Pazuzu, they found a way to make peace with the very things that frightened them. They didn't deny the existence of demons or pretend that everything was under control. Instead, they acknowledged the chaos and tried to harness it. They chose to work with the dark rather than be consumed by it. Pazuzu wasn't a savior in the traditional sense. He was a guardian forged in fear, a necessary evil, a protector by power. There's also something profoundly human in this duality. In modern terms, Pazuzu can be seen as a symbol of the parts of ourselves or the world that are dangerous but necessary. He represents the idea that sometimes you need to confront horror with horror. You need something strong enough to stand in the path of destruction and push back. That is what Pazuzu was to the people who invoked him, a force of chaos, tempered and turned toward survival. Even today, long after the fall of the civilizations that birthed him, Pazuzu's image continues to echo in the collective imagination. Part of that persistence is because of his dual nature. He is a character who cannot be easily defined. He is not good or evil, not divine or mortal, not friend or foe. He exists in between, in the spaces where lines blur and definitions fail. This makes him enduringly relevant. In times of fear and uncertainty, people have always looked for figures that embody the contradictions they feel. Pazuzu is one such figure. He is both the storm and the shelter from it. Ultimately, Pazuzu's dual role as destroyer and protector shows us something essential about ancient beliefs and human nature. We are never purely one thing or another. The same traits that make something terrifying can also make it powerful. The same forces that can destroy us might also save us, if understood and approached with care. Pazuzu's mythology does not offer easy answers or comforting morality. Instead, it offers raw, unapologetic truth. The world is dangerous, and sometimes to survive it, you must call upon your own monsters. Pazuzu's influence and legacy stretch far beyond the dusty tablets and worn amulets of ancient Mesopotamia. Though his origins lie in the rich and complex mythologies of the Akkadians, Assyrians and Babylonians, the image of Pazuzu has found surprising echoes throughout history, and even into the modern day. Unlike many ancient deities and demons whose stories have faded into obscurity, Pazuzu has endured. His frightening form, ambiguous morality, and connection to both evil and protection have made him a compelling figure across cultures and time periods, re-emerging in various guises and being reinterpreted to suit the fears and fascinations of new generations. The earliest enduring legacy of Pazuzu can be seen in the artifacts left behind by those who worshipped or feared him. Small bronze or terracotta amulets depicting Pazuzu were commonly used as protective talismans. His image appeared not just in temples or ritual spaces, but in everyday homes, above beds, in personal jewelry, and even buried with the dead. These amulets were tools of warding, used especially to repel the demoness Lamashtu. The persistence of these objects in the archaeological record tells us that the belief in Pazuzu's power was not fleeting or niche. It was widespread and deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric. To the ancient Mesopotamians, his image was a daily part of life, a reminder of the supernatural dangers they lived with, and the strange hope they placed in the powers that could counteract them. As time passed and the empires of Mesopotamia fell to newer powers, the old gods and demons were gradually displaced. But Pazuzu was not entirely forgotten. His terrifying visage left a mark in the collective memory of the region, and like many ancient figures, his characteristics were absorbed, altered, and reused in other myths and religions. The imagery of monstrous winged figures with leonine or canine faces and clawed limbs appears in other cultures, sometimes as evil spirits, sometimes as hybrid gods, sometimes as warning symbols. The blending of demonic traits over time has allowed Pazuzu's essence to re-emerge in new forms, even when his name was not explicitly mentioned. Even in Western culture, long divorced from the cradle of Mesopotamian civilization, Pazuzu found his way back into the spotlight. One of the most significant moments in Pazuzu's modern legacy was his appearance in the 1971 novel The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty and the 1973 film adaptation directed by William Friedkin. In this story, Pazuzu is presented as the demonic force that possesses the young girl Regan. The film opens with an archaeologist uncovering a statue of Pazuzu in Iraq, hinting at the ancient evil that has been awakened and brought back to the modern world. The demon's name is never spoken in the movie itself, but those familiar with Mesopotamian mythology, or who had read the book, knew that it was Pazuzu who had returned. This film transformed Pazuzu in the public imagination. No longer just a niche figure in the study of ancient cultures, he became a pop culture icon of demonic possession and supernatural terror. His image, now known to millions, became associated with exorcisms, hauntings, and the idea of a creeping ancient evil re-emerging in the modern day. What made this version of Pazuzu particularly terrifying was how little was explained about him. The lack of exposition made him more unknowable, and therefore more frightening. He was not portrayed as a red-skinned devil with horns and a pitchfork, but rather as something older and more alien, less moral and more primal. This cinematic revival had a ripple effect. After The Exorcist, Pazuzu began to appear more frequently in horror-themed media. He became a fixture in the iconography of dark and occult fiction. Artists, writers, and filmmakers drew on his imagery when designing demonic characters. His hybrid body, snarling face, and wings became shorthand for ancient evil. The mystique of his dual nature, both protector and destroyer, added depth to characters inspired by him. In this way, Pazuzu influenced not just how demons were portrayed in horror media, but also how stories about ancient supernatural forces were structured. Interestingly, not all modern references to Pazuzu paint him in a terrifying light. Because of his pop culture fame and distinctive name, Pazuzu has occasionally been parodied or reimagined in comedic or satirical contexts. In television shows like Futurama, South Park, or The Simpsons, his name has been invoked for laughs, often portraying him as a misunderstood or exaggerated figure. While this may seem to diminish his mythic presence, it actually speaks to the strength of his legacy. Only characters that are widely recognized can be satirized effectively. Even in humor, Pazuzu's enduring relevance is apparent. Beyond entertainment, Pazuzu has also inspired scholars, artists, and occult practitioners. In the realms of modern esotericism and ritual magic, ancient Mesopotamian deities and demons have seen a resurgence of interest. Pazuzu, with his complex and layered nature, is particularly attractive to those who explore the darker aspects of spirituality. Some modern practitioners invoke him not to cause harm, but to protect against harmful forces, much as the ancients once did. In these circles, Pazuzu is respected for his power, unpredictability, and ancient wisdom. He is not seen as a devil in the Christian sense, but as a spirit of the wind and wilderness, a reminder that danger can be channeled for defense when approached correctly. In visual art, Pazuzu has inspired countless works. Painters and sculptors fascinated with myth, horror, or hybrid creatures have used his form as a basis for exploring themes of fear, control, and duality. The mixture of human and animal traits in his body makes him a rich source of inspiration for artists interested in exploring the boundaries of the natural and supernatural. His wings, claws, snarling face, and reptilian skin are not just terrifying, they're visually compelling. His form bridges the gap between the familiar and the monstrous, making him a symbol of things that exist on the edge of understanding. Academic circles also continue to study Pazuzu as a key to understanding the values, fears, and religious practices of ancient Mesopotamian societies. Because his mythology touches on so many aspects of life, weather, disease, childbirth, spiritual warfare, he serves as a focal point for exploring how people in the ancient world dealt with the unknown. His continued relevance in both historical and popular contexts makes him a useful figure for analyzing the transmission of myths over time and the way ancient belief systems still influence modern thought. Ultimately, Pazuzu's legacy is not just about a scary face on a statue, it's about what that face represents, an ancient understanding that power is not inherently good or evil, but must be respected and carefully engaged with. His return in modern stories and art shows that we, like the ancients, are still trying to understand how to live in a world filled with uncertainty and invisible threats. We still look for figures who embody both danger and protection, who remind us that sometimes, survival means confronting fear with fear. In this way, Pazuzu continues to fly through our collective consciousness, just as he flew on the winds of ancient Mesopotamia. Whether he is feared, worshipped, laughed at, or studied, he is never fully gone. His image, his story, and the emotions he evokes remain powerful tools for exploring the shadowed corners of human belief. And perhaps that is the true legacy of Pazuzu, not just as a demon or a protector, but as a symbol of the complex relationship between humanity and the forces it cannot control. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like and subscribe for more, and stay curious.